It was like broken in a way that I couldn't really fix effectively. And I had just gotten to the end of my rope of like modifying my stick and trying to fix it. Like I was just so tired of buying new parts and stuff and like screws being loose. And like when I was younger, like, oh, that was so cool. Like I can replace my grommet and change the tension and
Yeah.
change my buttons. This time when it broke, I just said screw it. And now I play on hitbox because
Oh, wow.
there's nothing to change. It's basically a controller, but it's
Yep.
like the best version of a controller. So like now I've went from like playing on this stick to like I play on stickless now and I use cheat box.
Hello, and welcome to the Absolute Guard podcast.
We're the podcast that chronicles the past and present of the fighting game community and bring on various perspectives from Arizona. You can find us on Twitch when we go live at twitch.tv/Spiral Series, on YouTube with the VODs at youtube.com/Spiral Series, and if you're listening on your podcast, on Apple Podcasts and Spotify under Absolute Guard. To all of you watching and listening, we appreciate all of you that liked and subscribed, tweeted and retweeted any of the tweets from our personal accounts or the official Absolute Guard account. This is episode 18. My name is Benny, also known as AK Grandmaster B, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host John, who is thoroughly embroiled in this rappers versus FGC controversy going on right now.
Oh man,
how you doing, John?
I'm enthralled by it. There's a lot to talk about there, and our guest does want to talk about that too. So we're gonna bring him on pretty soon. Who are we talking to today, Benny?
We're gonna jump right into it. Today we're joined again by Mr. WillGetPaid. He was previously on episode 3, joined by Sean Dude, when we were talking about the Tekken versus, the Tucson versus Phoenix Tekken 10v10. We wanted to bring him on by himself this time, get a little bit of a discussion going on with him. How you doing today?
Oops, I forgot to unmute him. Sorry.
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. How's it going, Benny and John?
Doing good.
Pretty good. Very cool. Well, yeah, so last time we had you on for the Tucson versus Phoenix with Sean Dude, and we kind of went through all your origin already. So we just as a brief recap for folks, you are a top Tekken player in Arizona, a top Tekken player in the nation, really. Like you've placed very high at out of state tournaments, at Evo, at I think you qualified for a Tekken Invitational recently. Is that right?
Yeah, so that was last year. I won our tournament here, undefeated, and then I got an invite to the LCQ for Red Bull Kumite. So
cool, very cool. A Steve Fox player, and probably one of the strongest players, if not the strongest player in Phoenix right now.
So. Yeah, we'll have a little game with that later. That's what I was thinking about.
If you say so.
Yeah, that's my opinion. Sorry, I forgot about that. Too much, giving it away. Cool. So, how's that?
So
we were talking about Lupe Fiasco, weren't we? That was the thing. Yeah. Sorry, I completely forgot where we were going. Yeah. So Lupe Fiasco and Waka Flocka. So for the record,
Waka Flocka Flame. Yeah.
I'm not super familiar with the former, or the latter rather. But as of today, Lupe Fiasco and Chris G had a beef on Twitter. And I'm talking about it in kind of a patronizing way because the conversation was about that asinine. It was just people talking shit. And to recap Lupe Fiasco's history with the FGC, he played an an exhibition match with Daigo Umehara to celebrate the release of Street Fighter V. Daigo Umehara played his absolute hardest, but couldn't pull it out against Lupe Fiasco, and Lupe Fiasco took it. He hasn't been seen playing these games since, and Chris G had the wisdom to call out all rappers in the fighting game community, or all rappers saying that they are not good at fighting games, and then that turned into impugning Lupe Fiasco's honor and his word and his skills in the video game, and it escalated quickly into scrub quotes stuff like "I will street fight you in real life," that kind of shit. So that's what I know about it so far. I don't know much about the Waka Flocka stuff. We'll get paid. Do you have some commentary on that?
Oh, well, first of all, like that was super interesting because, for my own sanity, I do try to stay off Twitter like during the day, but I saw some of that stuff going on. I didn't hear all of that. I just saw like one tweet from Chris G, and I was like, that was like the only time that I've seen Chris G's tweets in like months. So I knew it was like, oh, this is gonna be a blow up for sure. Because like it's never him just saying like, yo, peep this new Morgan combo, right?
No.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so the whole reason I found it interesting was like, people were talking about Lupe Fiasco, and I remember that exhibition. That was fun and everything. But more recently, there was a Tekken tournament last weekend in Atlanta, and Waka Flocka Flame was there, and he's a huge rapper as well. And like, people that go to that venue, it's called 404 Esports. They've probably seen him before, and yeah, he was just like on Twitter talking with some of the players because apparently there was a Texas versus Atlanta like 5v5, I think.
Oh.
And Texas took it, right? Because there's great Tekken talent all over the country, all over the world, but like Texas has a lot of good players. Atlanta is like known as like the home of Tekken and like America, like traditionally, yeah, so Anakin is from Atlanta. He's pretty much like, if you could say like the face of American Tekken, he is like, if there's a Mount Rushmore, right? Like he's definitely one of the heads up on that mountain. So the fact that his team didn't win and they lost to Texas is I mean, that's just, kind of interesting. And then B, yeah, Waka Flocka wasn't going to take that because he's like, nah, Atlanta, because like, that's his hometown, right?
Too? Yeah.
And then he was kind of just calling out, him and his friend, I think, were just calling out like some of the Texas guys in good fun, like, money match me, like for like, honor and that sort of thing. And then it was just funny because various different players started getting mentioned, but it was like the fun kind of like trash talk and competition where they were like, yeah, I want to play you. Show me what you're about. And, somebody brought up some other players like Shadow 20Z, who's from Illinois. He like Waka Flocka like called him out, and he was like, if you can beat me, maybe you can be on my team, because he has his own gaming team. Apparently,
oh really?
It's called like Nobi Gaming, something like that.
Oh,
I didn't know about it until recently, but yeah, he has his own team and all that. And I was like, yeah, definitely sponsor Shadow and these other really good players. So it was much more like jovial over in our world. So then I checked Twitter today and I see this, and I'm like, oh, you guys all right over there in Street Fighter realm? Like,
oh no, that's what happened. Okay.
Yeah, okay. I was thinking it was a positive thing, and then I saw that. So
we told this out of order. So I guess, yeah, like I saw a little bit of that exchange between Sonic Fox and Waka Flocka. I didn't know the background there, but it was very good natured. Yeah. It was like, you think you're nice at the game, but you're not. And then that they kept it basically like that. But then, I guess it evolved once Chris G and Lupe Fiasco got involved. But I guess even from Lupe Fiasco's perspective, like, it sounds like he just kind of got dragged into it, and now he's mad that he got dragged into it.
I would be too. That's why when I heard about it, I was like, wait, people are saying Lupe Fiasco's like being weird. I was like, why was he even like brought into this? So
yeah, I mean, egos are a crazy thing, because I think that's what it really kind of came down to, because it's like people were discrediting him and his win over Daigo over, whether you guys think it's legit or not.
Can we talk about that? Let's talk about that.
I think those of us that are, are well versed in the FGC and, the players that are in it, know that wasn't a legit win.
Well, I think anyone that's ever played in the FGC also knows that you take those W's. So I don't care what you say.
I'm right up there too. I took a round off Daigo. I used that
Yeah.
as a profile pic on
Oh.
Facebook and on Twitter. I took a round off him. I
Yeah.
mean, the rest of the
Yeah.
time, like I basically got double perfected, but we're not going to talk about
Right. We don't talk about
that.
that.
We don't clip those parts. I clip the other part for myself. You know what I mean? But still, it's just like, I think for the most part, everybody knows that wasn't like a legit win, and I mean, it just became like a whole ego battle because from what I saw, because I didn't see a lot of it, I just saw like the initial like I'll spot anybody 19 games in a first to 20, and from Chris G, and then all of a sudden it was just like I don't know, other people in the FGC from like was it Gianna was just like imagine being worth millions and fighting with Chris G on the internet. And then I saw a quote tweet from Lupe where it was just like, why does it matter how much money I have? If he's gonna talk, I'm here for it or something like that. And I'm like, okay, so it's not like he's not
Yeah.
worried. Obviously he's not worried about the money or whatever, but it's
I
just it's a pride thing at that point.
One of these guys has a publicist and the other one doesn't though. So like I feel like so the conclusion to the story at least is as of this taping is that
Yeah.
Lupe Fiasco deleted all of his tweets. So none of that stuff's on the internet anymore. So guess what? We're preserving history on the Absolute Guard podcast. And now I think it's something like, oh, Lupe Fiasco doesn't even want to be part of. He's like, oh, I wasn't even part of this. Like I got dragged in. That's his narrative. He's sticking with that. And I don't think
Yeah.
I would love if Capcom had already booked Lupe Fiasco for Street Fighter 6 promotion to do that rematch with Daigo, and now it's not gonna fucking happen. No way it's gonna happen now, because Chris G's just gonna show up.
Oh boy.
Oh man.
Yep.
And also,
Yeah.
my opinion on that match with Lupe Fiasco, like I think Daigo was actually just trying to do trick shots the whole time, if I recall correctly. Like he would just walk up on parry on wake up, and he was just trying to parry everything. And then I think he was trying to like beat him at the last minute, and then something happened and he dropped his combo or he fucked up, and then Lupe Fiasco killed him. I think that's what happened. I think he was trying to like make it really like down to the wire and put on a really nice show, and then he fucked up, dropped a combo, and died.
Yeah, I mean,
So it
I
might
don't
have
know
been
about you
legit.
guys. Like I've done those kind of things too, playing with my son, playing with friends or whatever. I'm just like, yeah, you guys can get a few hits, and like, I feel good about yourself, and yeah, let me finish you off now. And then like you lose, and then next thing you know, like you never hear the end of it. It's like, oh, come on.
Yep.
Yeah,
Right.
so
So
yeah, that's pretty much how I thought of it. I mean, regardless of what it is, it's all silly. It's all Twitter nonsense. I don't think anything's gonna come of it.
yeah. No, I think that most of the story has run its course. Like it's pretty much if you watch the match, like you remember what happens, and then all of this nonsense today is pretty just out of left field. So it's probably better that those tweets got deleted because, of course someone's gonna try to drag this up 15
Yeah.
years from now and hold it over somebody's head, but who really cares?
Yeah.
So
For our listeners, we are trying something new and then talking about current events and stuff. We just got a bad draw this time around. Even then, if we had taped this like last week, it would have been even shittier because it was the dating conversation in the FGC Twitter.
Oh, I
well,
didn't even see
I
that.
don't-
those things go in circles anyway. Like it's cyclical.
That's very true.
That stuff comes up every now and again.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know you guys, John, you were talking about wanting to talk about graphics engines with Will Get Paid here. That's a little bit out of my arena here, but what exactly were you wanting to get into regarding those topics?
Yeah, so the background around here is that Will Get Paid is a software engineer, and he and I have I'm a software engineer too, and we've traded tips throughout the years here. But he has a specialty, I think, or not a specialty, but at least you've been focusing a lot on graphics and graphics engines and ray tracers, or what's that the thing where you point when you shoot a gun and then you can in a game and you can tell where the bullets spray and stuff like that. You explained that to me once over beers, and I was like, if we could rehash that and kind of bring Benny along as well, and that would be
Bullet
super awesome.
spray. How drunk were we? Yeah. So basically, I studied computer graphics in college, and I focused on, I studied computer science, so I focused on computer graphics. That's not what I do for my job or anything, but it's just like it's something that interests me.
Yeah.
And obviously, like I play video games all the time, so that's one of the prototypical examples of computer graphics. Like everything you see, somebody had to write the code to make you see it on the screen. And like I've done a ray tracer, which it's really great at making realistic images that are like still pictures, but doing it at anything close to what you would consider a gaming speed, like real time game speed, is like super difficult to do.
Okay.
And if you buy, like the best hardware there is now, you can sort of do it. But like most console games that we play don't really do that. But the concepts behind making the images are the same. So yeah,
So what for a layman, like what is a ray trace or a ray tracer?
ray tracing, it's literally it's a way of describing light. So without getting into too much detail, light is a bunch of rays, right? Like the sun shoots rays. So a ray tracer is where you basically have like an image, and then you put the sun somewhere. You describe where the sun would be in respect to the image, and then essentially in a screen, every pixel of the screen, you shoot a ray from the sun into it, and then you see what it hits, and then you color whatever it hits the color that it would be. That's the basics of it. That's technically like a ray caster, and then you can do like, well, what if the hits a mirror? Well, the light has to bounce, and all sorts of things
Reflections.
like that.
Yeah.
But that's the basics. Is you just shoot a ray into every pixel of the screen, and then whatever it hits, you paint that color, and then you have an image. And that's why it's really good at making
Oh.
realistic images, because that's a rather crude approximation of reality, but it is like very similar to what actually happens, like on a very basic level.
So do you
Okay.
use the ray tracer for like is it only for light, or if I wanted to change like my like a color from like green to purple or something, could I apply a ray tracer to it and then change that color that way?
The ray tracer think of it as like the system that your program runs on. Like
Okay.
all it does is it uses like mathematics to solve problems of like figuring out colors. So first it actually has to hit things. So it does intersection calculations.
Okay.
But anyway, after it intersects things, it just calculates what the color is. So as long as there's always a description of every scene that goes along with it, that's like the program. You give it a description, and then it runs the calculations on that description. So like if I said, oh, there's like a square box there, I would just give the dimensions of the box, and then with respect to where the sun is, if there's a ray that hits the box, and I say that the box is white, then like it will, wherever it intersects that box, it'll paint a white color. And that's what it does with everything in the scene at a very basic level.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I learned about computer graphics. But that aside for a second, all the games we play are using rasterization, which is
Oh,
it's a
fair.
different paradigm. But the basic concepts are kind of similar, because you still need to know like where things are and all that sort
Yeah.
of stuff. Yeah. So
Okay.
Nice.
So like when I think of like uh lighting engines or like how light is reflected on a fighting game model, the like I've seen it done two different ways. Like for Street Fighter 5, it's or even Tekken 7, like it's done like in the traditional way where you have a lighting source and then, your characters change colors based on that lighting source. So, but you also have to find that nice balance of making sure the characters don't blend too much into the background. So, oftentimes they have lights like in front of them, like where the camera is. And I see that style, but then I also saw like Arc System Works has like completely revolutionized the genre in with Strive and with Exerd prior to it, where they have the 3D models, but then each of them has their own individual lighting sources, like, and so
that's
you
called
get this
hero
anime
lighting.
hero lighting.
Yeah.
Okay,
So basically, there's yeah. So getting into like the rasterization pipeline,
yeah,
basically think of it like this: ray tracing is using physics like to describe things in your
okay,
system. Rasterization is literally cheating. It's just lying about everything to make the picture look cool. There's no physical basis in how rasterization works, like where the light comes out. So it's exactly like you said. basically, if I wanted that to be blue, I would just put a blue light right there, and it's invisible, but it paints blue light on everything. So like hero lighting is sort of like, people do podcasts all the time. So you don't see there's a light source right there that's making me visible. So like in those like Strive and stuff, whenever you see like a really cool cutscene and then it like zooms in on the character's face and then they're about to punch somebody real hard, like Dragon Ball Fighters, for example, while that happens, when the scene changes, lights are moved around so that it looks the best possible. It's not it's not systemic or systematic. Like it's not as if there's just the sun and then we happen to be in this perfect spot in the sun. No, like they literally put a light right outside of the camera and then do the animation so it looks cool. And like every video game does that has really cool animations. I'm sure even like NRS, they're really actually ahead of the curve in how they do a lot of their lighting and stuff. I know people have their gripes about the animation and stuff, but like the way the characters are lit and like they use what's called, a lot of games use this now. It's called PBR, physically based. What the heck does the R stand for? Whatever. It's physically based. No, it's like materials, but I forget why it's called PBR. But anyway, it's so that you can simulate more complex things like how skin reflects light and absorbs it and stuff, which like Injustice, Mortal Kombat. That's why you know who Kari Yuki Tagawa, he played Shang Tsung in the movie.
Oh,
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, super awesome. But like one of the skins in Mortal Kombat for Shang Tsung is him.
Yeah.
And like it looks like him. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's amazing. So yeah, I just like the NRS people are like they use super high tech rendering technology. It's still rasterized. It's not like using ray tracing, but it's just extremely advanced. Okay. And sort of segueing into that, like Tekken also uses extremely advanced, like always has techniques to make their games look amazing. So
I'm gonna say with the R rendering, was it rendering?
It could be. I actually don't know. I've heard the terminology, but it just basically means that objects have descriptions of like what their materials are.
Gotcha.
So to be clear though, that Tekken falls under the rasterization technique or the
So basically every fighting game ever uses rasterization.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it seems like Mortal Kombat's going for that realistic look, I guess, and like they're pushing it. Like it's like when I think of like realistic video games, I think of like the Naughty Dog games and The Last of Us and stuff, and they're doing like the full-on mocap stuff, and it seems like Mortal Kombat's going in that direction, but Tekken and Street Fighter, they while still using that same technique and avoiding cell shading that the ArcSys is doing, they still have like a stylized look to it, right? Like they still look like anime characters, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting how you marry the graphics engine, like because Tekken also has that realistic graphics engine though too. So how does Tekken handle like both the art style not clashing with the graphics engine?
Isn't that interesting? Like that's why I think Tekken is so intriguing. Like it's why it's so fun to watch, because like you're watching a guy that turns into the devil fight a bear, and like it somehow it seems like you just suspend your belief. You're like, yeah, no, they're just fighting. That's not weird, but it's the most anime thing you've ever heard of before, right? And it's because they use rendering techniques to make everything look like believable, we'll say. So for example, like I remember Michael Murray was very happy about this when Tekken 7 originally came out, but the bears, and Benny, you play Kuma, like they have fur, and they use like a very specific fur rendering to give it volume, because all it really is like in the game is it's just some like triangles, like very like thin triangles. That's all it really is. But there are all these techniques of like layering volumes over it so that it looks fluffy and like furry and stuff. And then they also, ever since honestly since Tekken 6, maybe Tekken 5, the team has always added in these things where characters interact with the environment. It's a very like on and off thing where if you fall in dirt, your character will get dirt on their clothing somewhere.
Wow.
There's one stage in Tekken Tag 2 that's really famous. It's just this purple lake. It's really weird. And if you get knocked down and you get back up, your character for like a good minute or two, their clothes are darker and like they look wet. So when that interacts with like Kuma, it looks really, like cool, right? So it's just the point is like those types of like interactions are what make the game it ground it somewhat in reality, even though what's happening on screen is super fantastical.
Yeah.
So for the fur being dirty and example, right? So to tie it back to the rasterization technique, it would be like, oh, so the bear hit the ground, and so therefore that spot that hit the ground, we need to project a light that's dirt colored onto the bear. Is that what, or like a hero light or something onto the bear? Is that how that would work to make the bear look dirty?
So it's sort of as far as the rasterization is concerned, all that really matters in a fighting game, because most of them are very simple. They have to run at 60 frames per second.
Uh-huh.
There's just a couple of lights around the stage so you can see everything, and they don't really update that much.
Oh, okay.
All that happens to the fur is there's just a line of code that's like, did he fall? Then paint this part of his body, a little bit more brown, like add brown to it if he hits the dirt. Yeah, that's all it really is.
Okay. That reminds me of some of the battle damage that I've seen on the recent Street Fighter 6 beta footage, at least, and it's the same deal. Like the more you get hit, the more like you get like graffiti stains on your jacket and stuff like that. If you like, I saw
graffiti stains.
Yeah, dead serious. Instead of blood and stuff, like Guile's got a pair of blue overalls, right? But by the end of the match, he might have like splotches of green on it from all the graffiti throughout the art. Throughout the art style
cool.
of like Drive Impact, Drive Rush, they just splash graffiti everywhere. So that's kind of cool.
I like that.
Going back to Tekken though, so like you said the Tekken guys are using advanced stuff. Is that stuff that they make in house, or is this like an engine that they've built throughout the Tekken series, or is this something that they're kind of grabbing off the shelf or taking from what other developers are doing? Like how is it looking?
So, so funny you asked that. So going back to Tekken, everything before Tekken 7 used a bespoke engine or like a custom engine. It did not use Unreal Engine. I used to think Tekken Tag 2 used Unreal Engine, but it actually didn't. And there's a lot of things that stem from that, like a lot of side effects of that. So when you create your own engine, you can design it exactly for the task at hand. And like Tekken games, what do you want from a Tekken game? Great graphics, 60 frames per second gameplay, low input lag, which is sort of ties into that. And like good movement and lots of characters, cool stages and stuff like that. So yeah, Tekken Tag 2, that's why it was actually really cool, because it was on PS3 and it had comparatively pretty, like compared to Tekken 6, it looked just way more refined. I think they used more like post-processing effects. So for example, like when certain people would do like their when they would go into rage mode or do like a special throw attack, there would be a lot of camera pans, right? Oh, so for example, Tag 2, there were tag throws. So you could throw someone and tag, and your teammate would come in and like clothesline them. Like say you were King and Armor King. King grabs you, he spins you, the camera shifts, and then you see Armor King come out of the screen and just clothesline you. Bam, right?
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. And so what happens subtly is there's like some motion blur there to like make the motion seem fluid. Yeah. And there's a little bit of a zoom, and there's like there's sometimes depth of field. I don't know if tag throws use them, but basically all of these techniques were implemented in the engine to highlight the action. And that's why if you see any clip of Tekken Tag 2 like promotional, it just looks super cool. It's like you're watching a movie or something for some reason.
Mhm.
I can't even explain some of the techniques, but like their mastery of like camera techniques is so crazy, and it goes all the way back to like Tekken 1, 2, 3. I'll never forget the first time I ever did martial laws. Actually, in Tekken 3, it was Forest Law, but I did Forest Laws one throw or 1+3 throw, I think it is. Where actually, no, it's like forward, 4, 3+4. But anyway, he runs up your chest and then falls on you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like it's so insane, right? And what they do to highlight it in Tekken 3 is the camera comes up and like sort of pans out so you can see how high up he ran up your chest, and then it
Yeah.
zooms in as he splats on you.
Yeah.
So it's really cool, and it like sort of tilt shifts too. Yeah, you should really check it out on YouTube after this. But that was the first time I was like, how the heck did you do that? Like, you've never seen that in Street Fighter. Like when I do dash punch with Balrog, like he just goes from here and then he goes there. Like, you know what I mean? In this
Yep.
game, the camera's like moving around. So they've been doing that stuff for years. So then in Tekken Tag 2, like when you beat someone, they would have this thing where like Kazuya, say you're playing Kazuya and like Jin, they hate each other canonically. So when it says you win and they're on the screen together, you'll see like one of them on the screen, and then one will come from off screen and they'll like look at each other and the camera will zoom in for a second and they like try to punch each other or something, like just to highlight
Yeah.
it. But basically,
That's
yeah,
stylistic, like, or rather, that's
exactly.
like like polish and style, like any kind of
Yeah.
character specific intros or finishing thing. It's just that, yeah, it's just about making the characters feel alive, right?
Yeah, and the way they're able to accomplish those is by their technology. And yeah, in Tag 2 and before, it was all a bespoke engine. But yeah, so in Tekken 7, it does use Unreal Engine 4, which at the time was kind of cutting edge stuff.
One question I had for you, like, obviously, like, the technical side about a lot of this stuff. Do you find yourself critiquing games or bad techniques, like when you play something, or you even see like videos for it? Because like that's something that like I see like these YouTube videos. Was it like military guy watches Call of Duty and gives his feedback, or F-16 pilot critiques Top Gun Maverick and blah blah blah. Like, do you find yourself in those kind of situations?
Um, yeah, I definitely critique things, but I'm definitely not an expert.
Yeah,
Making a video game is super hard, and engine is super
yeah,
hard. So even if I find something like a lot of stuff in like Street Fighter 4 and 5, I find
yeah,
easy to critique, especially in hindsight. Like the fact that they designed it is still like, I could never do that. So
yeah,
I try not to backseat too much, but you know how the FGC is. Everybody always talks
Yep.
about what they hate about things or like why something doesn't look good, which is why
yeah,
I always thought it was funny because people would always, clown on NRS for like its animation and stuff like that.
yeah,
And I was like, I mean, sure, but that's ultimately it goes to the stylization versus the technology. You just don't
yeah,
like the style of their animation, but like it's still fluid and like it looks good in a very specific way. Like it looks realistic.
yeah.
It's choppy, but yeah, that's just the way it is. I personally love like when it comes to Street Fighter, like the Alpha series. I always liked the stylization
Hmm.
when it comes to the 2D, but I'm I also love like the EX series, like EX plus two, because it has all these like particle
Yeah,
effects and like cool things, and like the meteor attacks where like you like punch someone off the earth and then they fly and bounce against the moon and then fly back into the earth and it
yep,
explodes. Like that's amazing. Yeah, it looks like weird or hokey compared to like Alpha Two's super serious like anime grounded style, but like
yeah,
it still looks awesome.
yeah.
I actually liked a lot of the stuff in EX2 better than the way Street Fighter 4 did it back in the day.
Okay.
Because Street Fighter 4's style started something that Street Fighter 5 still has, which is this like inky look, like the paintbrush,
Uh-huh.
Su-
pseudo cell shaded
Yeah.
type
Sumie
of
art,
thing.
Japanese sumie is what house I think is how it's inspired by. It's all the ink
Oh,
blotch
okay.
stuff, right? Yeah.
Cat's out of
Yeah.
control, John.
No, I can see that. No, what I was thinking of, like, so when I see Mortal Kombat, even now to this day, like just the animations, like the way that they jump and the movement and everything, right? It still like harkens back to like the old Mortal Kombat game. So that's why, like, I just kind of look at it as like that's just the way that they, like you said, they've chose to kind of animate or kind of have their game look, and like I don't really like, it's not my personal preference, like watching that, or like, I don't like the way that it looks, but it's just like I just look at it as well. It's kind of like a legacy thing. Like this is how they looked in Mortal Kombat 1 and Mortal Kombat 2, like when they did front flips and they did sweeps or whatever. Like that's just the way that the characters look.
That
Right.
actually is worth noting too, where like a lot of fighting game series, I think they had their initial art style and then they just kind of stuck with it, right?
Yeah.
Like Mortal Kombat, like you said, the animations they have that reputation. I wonder, like, do they ever feel hamstrung to have to stick with that? Otherwise, people will be like, "Oh, it's not Mortal Kombat," right?
That's
Yeah.
true. I didn't even
And
think about
it's
that.
the other
And
thing
I
is like you're talking about the go ahead, John.
like I was thinking like as well with Tekken, with the jump from the bespoke engine to the Unreal Engine, right? If physics and stuff are handled differently, there's a huge risk that it just wouldn't feel like Tekken, right?
It's so funny you mentioned that. So when Tekken 7 came out, there was a lot of gripes about like how it felt.
Hmm.
And it was murky, but like some of it was because of design decisions, which is like they specifically said, like, there was probably some, we'll just imagine there was like a spreadsheet where it says your character moves X units when you sidestep. And they decreased that from like 8 to 4 in Tekken 7. So like in Tekken Tag 2, if you sidestepped, you would step away from an attack. But in Tekken 7, it seemed like, oh, every time I step the same move, I get clipped and I get hit. So it's like, what? Um, so fast forward like 7 years later, right? Because this is just people talking about the arcade version. And there are different changes. Like Tekken 7, if you look at Tekken 7 when it came out on the arcade, and that was like back in 2015 in Japan and then like 2017 in America, so on PC, especially if you look at like the Japanese or the arcade version, it's just a different game in a lot of ways. It looks so different. Tekken 7 has changed as far as like the mechanics have updated, the graphics have actually gotten better, the UI and style choices have just improved. So like you can actually tell which version of Tekken you're looking at by looking at the life bars. So like when Tekken 7 Faded Retribution came out, which was an update for the arcade cabinets and consoles, the life bars changed colors, which I believe was to make it easier for those with color blindness to perceive like the life bars, because it used to be orange and yellow, but now they're purple and light greenish, light bluish.
Okay.
Um, which yeah, so basically the game has like just changed and evolved over time.
Okay.
One of the things that affected how things moved and felt was Unreal Engine has a lot of input lag by default. And I don't know if you remember this, but Harada and Michael Murray did actually speak with the Epic Games team and tried to get them into Unreal Engine to implement a fix that would decrease the input latency by a little bit. And this might also have affected Street Fighter V
It did.
because I believe it also had the same
Yep.
issue.
8 frames of
Yeah,
input lag is what that was the meme. Was 8 frames, and
yep,
it was
yeah,
mainly due to the Unreal Engine.
right. So yeah, and so like those things stack on top of each other, right? So there is that input lag, and then there's maybe something in the PS4 or whatever console you're on. Um, so basically, yeah, like moving in Tekken 7 when it started felt not great. And it's sort of gotten like better as time's gone on. And then people started realizing that the input lag of the PS4 itself was also part of it. So, because when we got the PC version, you could turn off VSync for the first time, and VSync adds an extra input lag, frame of input lag, if you know that. So, there was that. And then if you follow Arturo, he also realizes that if you overclock, like your USB polling rate, that
Mhm.
also decreases the input lag. So, like now we're playing like optimal Tekken set, like the best possible version of the game on PC, and like it actually feels pretty nice. But there are still obviously differences in the way the game was designed that make it just feel different, and they had to change those because they couldn't just take the data from the bespoke engine and port it directly to Unreal Engine. So one thing we noticed when we started looking at frame hitboxes is like the hitboxes of certain moves are just these weird curving lines. They're not straight lines like you would think of in Street Fighter a lot of the times. They kind of like do this. And some of them are obviously like hit circles. They're not boxes.
We had that in
Um,
Marvel 3 actually. That we called them hit spheres instead of hit boxes because
mhm.
they were like cones or cylinders sometimes instead. And I think Smash also has that as well, where they're hit spheres instead of boxes.
Exactly. And those are all technical design decisions as to whether you use a hitbox or a hit sphere. Um, but basically, what happens is you can kind of get these weird angles because, like in Marvel, even though the models are three dimensional, they only ever move in these directions. But in Tekken, obviously, there's a third dimension, so you can have glancing angles. So, like the prototypical example is if someone does a left uppercut
Mm-hmm.
and you try to step it, in old games you could just step away from it, but in this game, between the moves hit spheres kind of coming out in this weird line and your character's hurt box maybe being a little bit bigger. That's another thing, is in this game when you do certain actions your hurt box changes shape without getting too complicated, and sometimes they'll just glance into each other and you'll get clipped and you're like, what the hell, like I thought I stepped that, but you just doesn't work like that in this game. So
Okay. And in the chat here on our stream, we have Marty who says that the Tekken 7 characters have a hurt box cone sphere around them. So when we say hurt box, that means like the hittable area where if something makes contact with them, then their life gets reduced, or they get put in a combo or whatever. But the hit boxes, which is the offensive part, when you stick your limb out and you attack, those are lines. So when we say lines, though, like is it just then if those lines make contact with the model? Is it almost like how you shoot a gun in a first person shooter where like you point at it and then the thing shoots a line, and if that line makes contact with the model, then you consider it a hit?
yeah, except they don't go forever. But yeah, he's right. They're line segments, like not infinite lines. You know what I mean? Because obviously, if I jab you and you're half screen away, even if you're holding forward, it's not going to hit you because it doesn't go the full screen.
Some of my
So
opponents in other games will tell me that my normals reach half screen. I don't know, man. Okay, that makes sense.
yeah,
That makes sense. And that's so to be clear though, when we talk about lines as well for the technical folks, that's as or we get do we get into like vector math and stuff?
yeah, it's
Like
a three-dimensional line.
okay,
That's why. So like you can get a glancing angle of like it's not like it just goes like this, it goes like this. So sometimes, and that's where time and space matters, right? So moves can have multiple active frames. So in Street Fighter, I think it just like it kind of like turns red of like his fist, right? Ryu's crouching medium punch, like if it's red in the thing it's active, if it's blue it's not.
right.
In Tekken, when you actually look at the moves, if you do a left hook, you'll see these lines, but like each line, what I think is a different frame. So like the starting line is frame one, and then if it's a multiple active frame move, the second line is frame two, and then some of them have this weird curve. Like Steve Fox, my character,
Mm-hmm.
he uppercuts a lot, and so his moves like curve in on each other. So if for some reason you manage to move in a way that that last frame hits you, then I would be extra plus because you hit like the last active frame, instead of if I hit you with the first one, which is like the big dominant one, like the initial thrust or whatever, right? Um, so yeah, it's pretty complicated, which is why like nerdy people like me like to think about those types of things. Like it interests me, honestly. But as a competitor, it just pisses you off because you're like, I did this move and it behaved a different way five different times in five different situations.
Yeah. So, the concept of a hitbox and a hurt box is transferred pretty well into 2D and for 2D games, and we talked about how they're more spherical for 3D. And so, what would it be like if the like when you're say Steve Fox is going to do his jab, and then that line sticks out? What if the hit detection was based on the 3D model instead of the the cone sphere hurtbox thing that's already been implemented? What's your opinion on that?
Oh, well, it would just open up a different can of worms because right now animation isn't strictly tied to the hurt boxes necessarily. They're aligned, but they're not like the same. But what you're talking about is basically in a 2D sense, it would be called like pixel perfect hit collision detection, where like if the pixel of like we'll say Balrog's boxing glove touches Ryu's like the pixel of his shoe, then like if he's not holding back, he's going to get hit.
Right.
Wait, Ryu doesn't wear
And
shoes.
right, like if I do the low straight and you're not holding back, like it doesn't matter. I'm just going to hit that foot right there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'd be a similar thing in 3D games. It's just 3D animation is pretty complicated, or
Yeah.
it can get that way. So literally, like and you got to understand, like Tekken's animation system is so like also very complex. Think of a character like Eddie Gordo. They motion captured an actual like capoeira maestra, like to do all the moves. And you're constantly moving in capoeira. Your Jenga is like your basic stance, and you're just moving. So it's already annoying enough in Tekken, the fact that if you wait 2 seconds after the round starts and Eddie's just standing there, you could jab and it might miss because he's not in the same place as when the round started. He moved without pressing any buttons. It's crazy.
I get you.
And characters have sways, and like Steve just naturally sways as he's standing.
Mhm.
So yeah, like it would be cool, but it would also be super frustrating because then like you would be like, oh well, why did his arm go like this time and then it missed? Because the animation's not necessarily going to be the same every time,
Right.
So.
Yeah.
So for Street Fighter 4, the initial implementation for Street Fighter 4 was a switch from 2D to 3D, ignoring the EXs because they wanted to do a 2D playing game but with 3D engine, and so they did exactly what we just described, where they made the collision detection based on the models as opposed to hitboxes and hurt boxes that traditional Street Fighters ran on, and the the feedback at the Loke test was, this doesn't feel like Street Fighter. And so but the kicker though is that it solved a lot of the problems that you hear about complained in the fighting games today, which is like, or at least for Street Fighter today, which is, hey, I stuck out my low forward, that medium kick, the foot clipped through the character's idle animation and it touched like Chun-Li's leg or something. How come it didn't actually hit? And it's because it's not about the model, it's about the hitboxes instead. And I think that's an unfortunate side effect when you switch to these 3D games, or 3D engine games at least. And I'm curious for the future, like if we settle on that as games get more and more realistic, if we just settle on the hurt box and hurt cone sphere, and we never go back and never try the 3D model collision detection that's in shooters and whatnot.
Yeah, that's an interesting like question, and it goes back to what you were saying about like, well, does it feel like the game that I'm used to? And all these big fighting games are legacy, so it's hard to go back on that. Yeah,
similar to the Mortal Kombat thing. I'm actually curious. I wonder how Mortal Kombat use cone spheres too, or do they use hitboxes, hurt boxes? I don't
know. I assume it's hurt boxes and hitboxes, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the EX games because, like, I've recently seen that because Smug's been playing those games, and
Nice.
I've seen those clips that he's had of playing.
Does he play? Does he play Jack? I'm just Cracker Jack.
I'm not sure of the character. I just remember because just you talking about like the whole like knocking somebody like into the out of the earth kind of thing and coming back. Like I was seeing stuff of that, and like for me, like I never got into the PlayStation era. I was into that like really late. Like I actually didn't get my PS1 until like the year 2000, and I think it came out with like 96, something like that.
98, I think. EX2 plus.
98.
But yeah, 96 is probably when the first one came out. You're right. Mhm.
Yeah, well, just the PlayStation in general. But I didn't get it till like 2000 until I was like in the Philippines, and I think we ended up getting like a bootleg one. And then they were just like, it was one of those things. I was just like, and they were like, yeah, you can pick like 50 games, and I'm like, huh? Because they're all bootlegs. So I was just like, okay. And I was like, I started looking at all this stuff, and I'm like, Street Fighter EX2. I was like, what's that? And I was like, I pick that up, and I had no idea about any of these games, and I just remember like loading them up for the first time, and I'm like, holy shit, what is going on in this game? And like all the stuff that was going on, like you said, the supers and stuff are just crazy, man. That was a good time.
Is there like overlap between Street Fighter EX players and Tekken players? Like, did people play those back then, or did they mainly just stick with Tekken?
I wouldn't be surprised. I think it's funny. Like, if you look in certain circles, people will like say, or maybe if you looked at the reviews at the time from like GamePro, they'll say like the EX games were like subpar or like a pale comparison of like the other ones because they looked weird, which like yeah they did. Polygon
Yeah,
graphics were like kind of ugly back then, but at the same
yeah,
time like it was just the style they had to go with.
yeah,
But yeah, when you actually play them, they're like actual Street Fighter games. They just have different mechanics and they're super yeah, like so I think a lot of people that play other fighting games probably played EX, especially around my age and stuff, because
yeah,
that's what we had. Like I had a PlayStation and I had Tekken, which like I would play Tekken 3 a lot, and that game looked amazing. And then like I could have played like Street Fighter Alpha 3, or I could have played Street Fighter EX, and like one of those looks way closer to Tekken, and then one
yeah,
is like for like if I was loved Street Fighter 2 and that stuff, like maybe Alpha 3 I would spend time with, which I did play it a
yeah.
bit. But like yeah, EX2 was just way more interesting in a lot of ways. So yeah, I think there probably is a lot of overlap.
I went to Evo this past summer, and then they had the BYOC area was like for tournaments and stuff, but then they also had like an arcade cabinet area where everybody just
Yeah.
hauled in their Astro City cabs and stuff, and there were a ton of different fighting games, and all of the cabs with like the popular games were taken, like Third Strike and the Marvel games and Tekken and whatnot, but there was a lone EX2 cabinet that me and my buddy jumped on, and neither of us had ever played EX2 before. And he played
Yeah.
Blanca and I played Chun, and I did jumping roundhouse, crouching roundhouse, and then another jumping roundhouse, another crouching roundhouse. And that's all I did because I had no idea what I was doing. But it did feel like Street Fighter after a while because I started figuring out how to do low forward Hadoken in a 3D space, and that was kind of cool. I don't think I'd ever really go back and try to play that game competitively. I don't think there's a scene for it, but
There's I mean I
or
know
is
in
there?
the East Coast they play it. Like
Really?
there's people that still play it, and then you got to understand Arica made it. So like fighting EX Layer, like if you see any of the EX games, like EX Layer, those are
Mm.
all similar systems, and you got to understand like the reason it feels like Street Fighter is because Arica is from Street Fighter staff. Like they made Street Fighter 2. So like that's why it was always funny when people were like, "This isn't Street Fighter," when like it's literally made from the people that made Street Fighter. Like Arica and Capcom are just like it's like the Spider-Man meme, when they're like looking at each other. They're both devs, like that worked on Street Fighter. So
I hear that about the KOF series too. That like I think some of the Street Fighter One staff eventually left and went to SNK and then started working on KOF.
mm,
And then there was another cross pollination with Dimps. Some of they then from SNK a bunch of people left SNK when they exploded and they formed Dimps, which then Capcom contracted out to Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 5. So
oh, okay. I didn't
it's
know
like
that.
a gentleman's club of fighting game developers here.
It's a
Oh
small
man,
world, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, nice, nice. I mean, speaking of Street Fighter, I know another thing that you guys wanted to talk about was in terms of like the sunsetting periods for Street Fighter 5 going into 6, and then also Tekken 7 and then going to Tekken 8. So, yeah, what did you want to touch on specifically with those with that topic, John?
It's a wide topic because like I'm a competitive Street Fighter 5 player, and I don't really want to play Street Fighter 5 because the new game's coming out, and so like trying to juggle that and then also like stay excited about the content that's being created? Like you have like Street Fighter League going on right now, and ICFC is still going on for Tekken. Like the Tekken World Tour is going on. Capcom Cup is still going, but then just knowing that there's another game on the horizon, and especially because the two series that we're talking about here are in different phases. Where with Tekken 8, you only can see we've only got a trailer to work with, right? And so I'm curious about like specifically for the Tekken scene, like how are you guys? Are you guys excited about Tekken 8? Is it killing your motivation to play in Tekken 7 tournaments? Is it impacting it at all, really?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that. So you're right. We just have that trailer, and it looked amazing, right? Like the graphics are insane, which is like that's the Tekken classic. Like it always just has to just look super cool.
Yeah.
And I think that really motivated a lot of people to be like, yeah, I can't wait. But then they were like, all right, what do I do now? And they probably have stumbled upon like an ICFC or maybe saw a Twitch stream and got interested in it. I know specifically that it's sort of revitalizing a little bit some people's interest in Tekken 7 because Tekken specifically, it always gets like dragged through the mud for this, but it's like a legacy game. So
Mhm.
like me spending the last 7 years of my life playing Tekken 7, I know some of that information is going to carry over to Tekken 8. Like
Yeah.
it just will.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, it doesn't make me unmotivated to play Tekken 7. I think the only thing that really unmotivated me and other people to play is just, the pandemic. But that
Yeah.
was like fighting game why like the whole SGC
Yeah,
felt
that's
that.
worldwide.
Yeah.
Any hobby you feel unmotivated.
Yeah.
And I think it didn't help that Tekken 7's netcode isn't the best
Yeah.
implementation. It's actually, to be fair, it's one of the better Tekken netcodes that there's been. I think Tekken Tag 2 probably in some ways felt better for different reasons. And like, maybe it does perform better like if you had a really good connection. But like, yeah, Tekken 7, I'm pretty sure at this point, like it's been confirmed. It does have a rollback implementation. It's not the best, it's not a cold mystics joint or whatever, but
Yeah.
it does have rollback. It's funny, like we know it has rollback because people love to, post like Twitter, like 30-second clips out of context of something crazy happening. And
Yeah.
someone will post a Twitter clip of literally rollback happening. And they're like, what the heck is this? Like, is this online broken? And they're like, no, that's literally what rollback looks like.
Fix the netcode, add
Yeah.
rollback.
Right, they'll be like, fix it. All right. But and also I think it was really smart. I don't know if you guys follow this, but there was a recent system update to Tekken 7, which kind of crazy this wasn't there in the beginning, but whatever. Now when you start an online match with someone, it shows not only their bars, like 4 or 5, whatever that means,
Yeah.
it shows the ping, a round trip ping between you and your opponent, and it shows how many rollback frames are active in the match.
Uh,
And like it can change, depending on the quality.
yeah.
So I think that's cool because it gives you a visual indicator of how crappy things are about to get. Because like if you're playing someone, it can be really jarring when you're on a 4 or 5 bar and then all of a sudden like it starts feeling like you're underwater. You're like, well,
Yeah.
what the hell? I thought we had a 5, but then you notice your ping went up to 130 milliseconds. So
Yeah.
someone like me, I can like at least reconcile it, or there's some sort of evidence like, oh, okay, that's what it is, instead of just being like, no, your internet just sucks all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Which obviously, if the net code were like super duper good, it wouldn't matter as much. But I mean, you can't overlook the internet as a problem. Like it affects all of us, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, it's we're all in different stages, I guess, or different kind of places in terms of like where we're at in the games. Like you, for instance, like you said, like you're playing Tekken 7 and like you're still competing, you're still going to tournaments. John was up till recently competing and then kind of doesn't want to. And then me, like I haven't been competing for the last few years, other than, con tournaments, but those are whatever. So yeah,
yeah,
it's like
to be fair, I mainly stick to locals, and I
mhm,
do play ICFC every now and then. But yeah, like I have not traveled to a major in like 2.5, 3 years. So I'm
yeah,
going to Kumite in Tennessee this weekend.
Nice.
That's in Tennessee. And yeah, so that'll be the first major I've been to, and as long as I can remember. So it's gonna be fun because I've seen people like going, and it looks like they've had a great time. I saw a bunch of people go to Evo, um, so I'm looking forward to it. But at the same time, I don't I don't have that like huge rock in my stomach feeling back like I did when I was like traveling all the time and really trying to make a name for myself. Now I'm just
Yeah.
kind of like I'm more going to KIT to support Vandy, who runs it.
Okay.
He kind of started that event around when Tekken 7 came out. And I've always wanted to go, but I just never could. And then this year is the last one they're doing. Actually, last year was supposed to be the last one, but
Uh-huh.
they took pity on us because of the pandemic, and we're like, you know what, we'll give you guys one more chance. So yeah, I'm just going to have a good time and play in a freaking tournament, like a big one for the first time in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could tell you, like, I've gotten to play in two big tournaments since the pandemic began, and it's been each one has just been like a very an awesome experience and something that I'm going to remember for a very long time. I think I got extremely like I got better just going to those events, and I think that's a common thing for any FGC player. Is just if you go to any kind of offline major, you're going to get better just implicitly by playing new people, by seeing matchups that you don't ordinarily see, get by putting yourself in a different environment and adapting in there. You know.
I did want to mention, so like the pandemic and the sunsetting period, it's actually hilarious. Like it's crazy. So like Tekken 7's been out for like 7 years now.
Long time. Yeah.
And I remember, aside from how the games changed, like how I've changed as a player, and not just my gameplay, like what I do differently. I definitely play the game differently than I did back when it started.
Yeah.
But the fact that I started playing Tekken 7 on a Mad Catz Korean edition stick back when Mad Catz still made sticks, right?
Right.
Okay.
And then I switched to an Itoki Omni during my like playing the game because I was like, you know what, it's time to like level up to the big boy Korean Tekken stick, which is hilarious because I don't play Mishimas, and you would generally do that to get to play Mishimas, but I didn't know that. I just want a Korean stick. And then ironically, I actually have two of those, but one of them broke in a really weird way while I was playing. Like it was right after the 10v10, and I was trying to fix it, but it was like broken in a way that I couldn't really fix effectively. And I had just gotten to the end of my rope of like modifying my stick and trying to fix it. Like I was just so tired of buying new parts and stuff, and like screws being loose. And like when I was younger, like, oh, that was so cool. Like I can replace my grommet and change the tension and
Yeah.
change my buttons. This time when it broke, I just said screw it, and now I play on hitbox because
Oh wow.
there's nothing to change. It's basically a controller, but it's
Yep.
like the best version of a controller. So like now I've went from like playing on this stick to like I play on stickless now, and I use cheatbox, and it's honestly just because it's more convenient. Like
Yeah.
yes, it's the best controller, but like I feel like I enjoy traveling with it. You know what I mean? Like traveling with the Itoki Omni. If you've ever held one, like it's just a huge metal box. It's made of like like I don't know, steel or something. It is heavy. It is heavy. And like the fact that I can put like the hitbox on my lap, and like it's got the anti-slip material under it, but it doesn't weigh anything. I just put it in my little bag and I just carry it with me. So that alone has made me like enjoy going to events way more because it's just like, it's like a literal weight off of my shoulders.
Yeah.
Um,
One of the other
yeah.
benefits is like you're talking about the differences in the spring in the sticks, right? And a lot of the players that I've played with over the years put a lot of emphasis on spring tension, and so anytime they had a custom spring tension, and they couldn't use anybody else's stick, any other stick whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then for a hitbox though, like I could borrow yours, Steven, and then it'll be fine because
Right.
it's just an OBSF 24 button is an OBSF 24 button or whatever the
Yeah.
Korean equivalent is.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a funny thing that you mentioned, John, because I remember initially like when sticks were, becoming more mainstream with the Mad Cat stuff, it was like, I remember the rationale was like, well, I want to play on stick because if I ever go to Japan or if I ever, go to somebody's arcade, like, I could play over there
ah,
no problem, right?
Yep.
And
yeah.
like if you were on Hitbox, it was like, well, how am I going to play on stick if I have my Hitbox? And now, that arcades kind of, aren't really here anymore. If you go to Japan, yeah, you'll have to do that. But I mean, that's a interesting thing that you put out there because I remember that was something that I think you said years ago we had talked about something like that,
Yeah, yeah. Like
and you were
the
like,
spring,
yeah,
it was part of like to me it was actually like part of fitting in because I was like I need to mod the spring so that way I can have a custom stick like everybody else has a custom stick. I mean, Razane had a big ass like hap stick, and then a bunch of people had modded the Mad Cat's TE sticks, and some people had modded the SE sticks, and so everybody had their own custom goddamn thing. Some people did octo gates instead of square gates. You know?
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I saw a meme recently where it was just like, put an octo gate in your stick. That way, if somebody wants to borrow it, you'll be like, hey, I got an octo gate. Like they're not gonna touch it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just like it's funny. It's kind of funny how like it came all full circle
It
in
did.
terms
It
of like,
truly
yeah, because
did.
like it's true because like, yeah, if you play on Hitbox, he plays on Hitbox. Like if I'm like, oh, my Hitbox doesn't work, I can play it on that other one, no problem. I don't gotta worry about spring tension. Maybe if you have some of those like mechanical keys or something like that, I'll be like, oh, what are these? But
Right.
for the most part, the layouts and stuff like that, I could still get used to that.
So I think traditionally on every podcast episode, we always go into the hitbox debate. I think I'm pretty passionate about it. Benny's pretty passionate about it. But to get back on the topic of the sunsetting period, like your point, Stephen, was that like your tastes had changed over the course of these 7 years, right?
Hmm.
And so I think that's one of the beautiful parts about the sunset period of a fighting game is that you get a chance to kind of like look at the game in a time capsule and kind of reflect on how you changed and how your life changed as the game grew, I guess. Particularly because these most recent games have lasted for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even Street Fighter 4 though, like that's something that all three of us have played, and so
yeah.
like you know the gap between Ultra and when they announced 5, like how
It's
are
too
you
short,
guys
in my
feeling?
opinion.
Too short?
And I think I've spoken to you about this before, but at the last Capcom Cup, which I was at,
Mhm.
it was like super cool to me, right? I'm just like watching Ultra, and the game had its issues. There was Elena healing, and like everybody was memeing on that. And I think I don't know if you guys, yeah, there was just people playing like characters that people didn't like, but I thought like DiCaprio was awesome. I liked all the new things they added, but basically when I saw the demo for Street Fighter Five, like at that Capcom Cup, I was like, "Oh, that's cool," but I hope it doesn't come out like anytime soon because I think like this game just needed a little bit more time. I know other people will disagree, but I was just like, Ultra to me was a different game than like the other ones.
Yeah,
And I just wanted to see like another year or two of that. And then I also, from the development perspective in my head, I was like, I don't know. Maybe it was what I saw in the demo, but I was like, I think this game needs a little bit more time in the oven. Like
yeah.
it looks interesting, but I just want it to be like all done when it comes out, and it wasn't. So
Yeah, yeah. For me, like I don't know, with for because this is a completely different arc going from 5 to 6 for me because I haven't been regularly playing or competing since I don't know season 2, season 3. Whereas with 4, like I was playing through Ultra, like I really had a love for that game, and playing Honda and my character, I was actually ready to kind of move on from that just because of all the nerfs that he had gotten over the years. Like I was just at the
Oh.
point to where like I love the game and like I got very fond memories of it, because of entering the FGC and all this stuff. But in terms of like my character, it's like he just continually got worse and worse through every iteration. And it was just like, then I had to start dealing with new BS, whether it was like you said, Elena, or whether it was Yun and all this other stuff. Like as the game expanded, like my character just got progressively worse. And I was just like, I felt like I was fighting a uphill battle. And like in a lot of ways, like I felt that's kind of why I stuck with being kind of a character specialist because I felt like my all the years that I had put in, like that was more important than to me to say, hey, let me go switch to DiCaprio or switch to somebody else that's whatever top tier at the time. because it's just like I felt comfortable with like what my character was, or what I could do with my character versus like trying to learn somebody new.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
I had a bit of a different perspective from Tekken. I feel like, well, I feel like Steve Fox definitely has been nerfed over time, and
Mm.
he's still a great character. But like when you go from being like right under top tier to
Mm-hmm.
like, or I don't even want to say right under top tier. I mean like right under the best characters. Like
Yeah,
the moment Akuma came out, he was pretty much the best character. People just didn't realize it. But
yeah.
then there was always like, the Mishimas were really good. So like in a typical like Tekken tier list, the Mishimas tend to be high for just various reasons. But like Steve would always be around there because he's a natural counter to that style in a similar way that Balrog is a natural counter to Shoto's
Mm-hmm.
traditionally. So he's always just like up there. Steve was like that. But he was also just designed super well. Like in Tekken 7 system, he had a lot of ways to like abuse the mechanics and stuff. And he just had a really good move in the beginning. And yeah, he was just designed really strong in this game. So, but as time's gone on, and then they added more DLC characters, and like every DLC character is designed for Tekken 7. So they use they all abuse the mechanics, and they're great. So Steve naturally got pushed down, and then they actually nerfed him, and they took out a lot of his like really strong stuff from season 1 and 2. And then later on, they kind of did like smaller nerfs here and there, but it like all added up to this like bell curve where like everybody used to be like, "Oh, Steve, like easy top 5, like top, yeah, everybody, top 5, top 8 character." Whereas
Mm-hmm.
like now, like you could argue that he's up there, but there's just so many characters that are just clearly stronger in a lot of ways to where he's still scary, but like, you have to play him really perfectly to be like that. And so it's like, okay, well, I could work really hard to get here, or I could pick this character that already has these skills and then try to take it up to the next level, right? And that's sort of why I switched, or I added a secondary later on in the game. I started playing Claudio
Okay.
when I picked up Hitbox. Um,
That's a good
because he's
idea.
simple to use. He's simple to use, and he gave me a different window into the game. And honestly, that made me enjoy Tekken so much more, like relearning the game with the knowledge that I already have and just
Mm.
accepting the fact that like my execution is going to be kind of trash for a while on Hitbox, but the end goal is going to be worth it. And the same thing with like learning a new character. Like, yeah, I'm gonna get hit by stuff that I don't normally get hit by, but I get a hop kick. Like Steve's never had that, and Claudio has one of the best hop kicks in the game, and a bunch of other cheap
Mhm.
stuff. But it like puts a smile on my face when I pick up the character now because I'm like, imagine Benny, you were playing Honda, and then you had a secondary of Sagat or like vanilla Akuma or something, right? Where like
Yeah,
you understand the strengths of that character because you've been pitted against it so much
yeah,
that anytime you're just like, wow, this tool is so cheap. If I had it and then this situation happened, I would do this. And that's exactly what I do with Claudio. Because people like when they play Steve, they know what he can do. And since he doesn't have that hop kick, they can sort of like pester him a lot. But if you try to do that
Yeah.
when I'm playing Claudio, like I'll just hop kick you and do like half your health, right?
Do
And
you,
it's so crazy.
do you
Yeah.
do you tend to pick your alt because you want to do that thing specifically and just be like, I'm tired of people doing this one thing to me. I'm gonna find a character that can counter it, specifically
That's
that
part of
thing.
it,
yeah.
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 Because so shout outs to VMGF, like who was my training partner and my rival, like when he was here in Arizona. He played Claudio, and I'll never forget. He won this tournament. It was Super Ascension in like Gilbert, and I was talking to him the day of, like he beat me in grand finals, and he was just like, "Yeah, I found some cheap stuff because Claudio had gotten a buff. Like it was like season 2.5 or something. Claudio got a buff." And he's like, "Yeah, this stuff looks pretty good." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I was like watching him and I was like, "Wow, like he can just do this move." And then I played him and I'm like, "Holy crap, he can just do this move." And you have to deal with it. And like it just got on my nerves. I would always talk trash about it and stuff. Like, but
Yeah,
it was like I loved it because I was like, man, he figured that out that fast. And so when I like picked up the character and I started using that, I was like, you guys just forgot. Like it's still there. They didn't nerf him. They made him
yeah.
better. Like it's crazy. talking about that when there's so many characters in the cast that everybody has cheap stuff, but like it's fun when you get a little bit of that for yourself.
So
Yeah.
it seems like that's another strategy for kind of powering through the sunset period, which is like take the game and then try to look at it from a different lens, where whether
Yeah.
that's a style change or a just picking a new character, but you're also dealing with the culmination of the developers' balance changes, right? And
Yeah.
so you have this like at least for the most recent games, they with DLC and new characters getting added, you have almost like a complexity creep over time. Like as you add more characters, you have to learn more matchups, and so your initial character may not have the tools for those matchups anymore.
Yeah.
Like suddenly they added armor to the game or something like
Mm.
that, right?
Yeah.
And so I can see Honda, who has quite frankly a limited tool set, eventually just falling to complexity creep.
Yeah, he doesn't even have a dive kick.
Yeah,
what
and
kind of character
guess
is
who?
that?
Guess who won Capcom Cup for Ultra? It wasn't Elena. It was Yun. And
Yeah.
so
I
that's
mean, yeah,
another.
it's
Oh, go ahead, Benny. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, I was just gonna say, like, now I kind of find myself in that kind of like character crisis because, like, I did try to pick up Street Fighter V again a few years later, and
I
John can
remember that.
attest to this because we played games. I started playing Ed because I started playing a Honda first, and then I was just like, yeah, he's cool, but like, he's not. It doesn't feel the same, right? So I started to play Ed, and then like it kind of goes to what you're talking about, Steve, of just kind of having new tools and other things because, like, I was so used to just pestering people with Dalsim and doing stuff like that, and then all of a sudden it's just like I had what is Ed's? Is it Flicker? The hands? Is that what
Flicker.
it's called? Yeah, I got Flicker, and like I was able to play him like Honda and four, like because that was basically safe, and I was just like, oh, I can just pester people with this stupid punching thing, and like people would get hit by like the stray hits from it, and I'm just like, this is kind of dumb, but like he wasn't like a OP character, but it was like it did open my eyes to kind of like, oh well, now I got something else to play, or I got a different kind of tool set to work with to to go with the knowledge that I had of the game. So like after playing six and like the beta, like I'm really kind of hyped for that. But then like yeah, I do kind of have a character crisis because all three of those characters are supposedly supposed to be in launch. So I'm just like
Yeah.
between Sim and Honda and Ed, and then Guile was really good, and I'm just like I don't know. Maybe for the first time, I might play two characters to start.
So that's actually something that I'm doing to prepare for 6 during my sunset period for Street Fighter 5 is and to be clear, when I say sunset period for 5, I actually meant for this entire year and possibly even last year too because we all knew that like this game was done, right? And so
Yeah,
what I've done is gone back and learned other Street Fighters to kind of crystallize like what I like in a character and what I like in a video game, really. And so I think that like the idea of like so like Steven, what you're talking about with Claudio and with and Steve Fox, it's like, all right, so I know how I want to play. I want to play a Shoto counter or a Mishima counter, right? And then from there, I'm going to kind of play outside of my style and then see what I can incorporate from that into my style for the new game that's coming out eventually. And then you may end up with somebody besides Steve Fox or Claudio in Tekken 8, right?
yeah,
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm pretty confident Claudio's going to come back because he's just like a great, like, simple starter character,
okay,
and I don't think he was like too divisive or anything. So yeah, I'm kind of hoping he does because it'll be like a great way to just get started and just start kicking butt. Whereas like I'm sure I'll mess with Steve, but you know after the balance patches in this game, I can't be sure that like Steve Fox and Tekken 8 they're gonna like nerf something crazy on him so that he plays different, and I'll have to like learn that style. But yeah, it's more of like I'll definitely be on the lookout for characters that require less input for more output. Not to say that they're
mm,
easy to play because every character is like
yeah.
hard to win with, but like it's more of like an execution thing. Like it
Yeah.
was funny. I was talking to my friend and I was like playing him and I did like a combo on him with Steve. And I was explaining to him, I was like, they nerfed like this character, but he can still do this much damage. But it's similar to like a Kuma like stuff in Street Fighter, where like everything that I'm doing here, like these are all like just frames, and they're all easy to miss. So like, I don't know if that makes it fair from a balance perspective, but like the people that would complain about those types of things, they can complain all they want, but like they also can't do these combos. Like they're really hard.
Yep.
And I'm doing them on hitbox, and I'm like, I can still drop this on hitbox because what I realized is Steve's like the difficulty in the combos isn't in like dexterity all the time. It's just timing. And since when you play on console versus PC versus your friend's monitor versus yours, like all of those variables will just screw up your timing. So
Yeah.
that's why, like, I kind of watch like a smug idiot when I'm watching like a tournament, and you see like Knee or like the best Tekken players in the world that play Steve, because like Knee will sometimes counterpick Steve, right? He'll drop the same combo that I drop. And it's just like, it's just hard. It's just that hard to do consistently. So yeah, it's just like, I could try to do that and it would be cool if I hit it against someone, or I could do this other combo with Claudio that's not that hard and still do the same amount of damage, So,
I came to that same conclusion throughout my fighting game career, where I'm like, I started with highly technical characters and now I'm playing fucking Ken.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because like I think we talked about that previously. Like Zane mentioned something in our group chat about the Benny method, and I was like, "What do you mean? What's the Benny method?" And it was a matter of picking a character that's not like too complex, so that you can learn the game engine more than you can kind of learn, have to learn the intricacies of the character and the game engine at the same time.
Yeah.
And like I don't know, that for me that's just kind of always kind of what I've kind of gravitated to, other than Dalsum, I guess. But when it was like Honda or other characters or charge characters in general, like Guile back in Street Fighter 2, it was like he's got 2 moves and anti-airs, right, or normals, right, and that's it. And like it's a real kind of like basic way of kind of just learning the game. So it's just like that. I've just always kind of gravitated to those characters and that kind of mentality when I play games.
Yeah, I call it the burden of options, right? Where it's like the simpler you go, the more you're going to be able to create that environment, Benny. Like, like a lot of the mix-up characters that I used to play, like it would be, I have 10 options with Viper or Ibuki, and I can be like, all right, well, I got to pick the right one out of the 10 ones, and it's nice to have all 10 so I can cover all these different scenarios. But what if I could just headbutt instead? And then I can focus on playing my opponent. I'm not even trying to be demeaning or anything. It's literally like, why blow up your mental stack like here? Like, why increase the volatility? That's ultimately what we're talking about here, is that we have these characters that we like, but the risk of dropping a combo, the risk of picking the wrong option because you have too many options, it creates this volatility. And over time, I think as we've grown accustomed to these games, this like 7-year lifespan, we're like, I know enough about this game and how volatile it can be. I want to try to actually find ways to simplify my game plan, whether that's adding like playing a character with more health or with less options but more powerful options.
Mm-hmm.
What if I have an option that beats 5 things as opposed to 5 options that beat 1 thing apiece? I think I'd rather pick the one.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the other thing I was gonna mention was in terms of like the play styles. Like I find that you're talking about like incorporating your play style, and I find it the funniest thing, like when we chat about like when we play, is you always comment on how defensive I play, and yet like I don't know if that's just maybe over the years I've become a more defensive player, because early on like I was kind of just my friend would be like, is your stick stuck in jump forward? Because like I'm always going in and like getting anti-air, getting blown up by simple stuff, and he's just like, why do you keep jumping? And I'm just like, I don't know, it's just like that's just how I want to play. But then like when I play you now, like you're just like, oh, you're always in your shell, you're very defensive, oh, I got to open you up now. And I'm like, really? I was just like, I just never saw myself as that kind of player, so I don't know if I've just evolved that way over time or what.
It could be just changing characters, right? And like playing Dalsum and for the entirety of Street Fighter V just made you a defensive player by default, right? And so like I think that's another value of being at the sunset period and being like, I'm going to switch to a different character because I can force a different style and then take that style into Tekken 8 or Street Fighter 6, right?
It's funny you mentioned that, Benny, because it actually reminded me. And when you were talking about Ibuki, John, obviously, you guys know I started playing Street Fighter 4, honestly, when I moved out here. And I was playing Balrog because I learned, I just played him in old games, but basically, long story short, the reason I played Balrog is because when I was in Rochester in college and Street Fighter 4 came out, one of my classmates or one of my compatriots taught me like how to do his combos, like it headbutted into Ultra and stuff. So that was just my character. So that's why I played like when I came out here. But if you'll remember, at the end of Street Fighter 4, John knows, I switched to Rose.
Fuck that character.
Because she was pretty cheap. in a lot of ways, but I liked her from Alpha, honestly. Like that's why I picked her. But then, when the Ultra 2s were invented and stuff, and I started seeing all the crazy like setups, and by that time I'd realized that Street Fighter 4 is a set play game. So I was like, well, Warog is always in front of you or behind you. So like, or sorry, he's always in front of you. He can't cross you up.
Yeah.
Outside of like one really stupid situation. But anyway, I was just like, well, let me try this mix up stuff because like I'm just trying to play straight up. And then when I get knocked down, I get Vortex. So I was like, how about I Vortex you guys? Stupid Ultra. And so like, yeah, like Rose was super fun. And I started finding out really cheap setups with her towards the end of the game, like how to make like Soul Spiral like safer. Because I learned like, if you hit it like super late in the frames, it like pushes you away. And so like people are like, oh, I can like throw out a button and it just whiffs and he sweeps you. Like that was so fun. Yeah, that was great.
I remember in that era, I was doing the same thing. I switched to Yun to try something different and not like hardcore Vortex mix-ups. But fucking Rose beat Yun. And so I'm like, oh, man.
Did she really, though?
I think so. That stupid anti-air, the wake up, the backdash. The backdash blew up most of my dive kick setups.
You could just OS into Yoho, right? Well, yeah.
Yeah, you could. I guess you could.
See? Don't you downplay Yun.
One of them did win Capcom Cup, yeah. But that's so that at the end of the game, you figured out what the meta is. You mentioned with Street Fighter 4, at that point the game had been figured out and that Vortex was strong and that wasn't going to change. Actually, for Ultra, then it turned into burst damage being strong, and that's why Yun ended up being strong, right? And I think that, is there anything in Tekken 7 in particular where you're like, this is really strong currently in this season, and that's something that's been built up over time, and this is what the game is overall, and I'm going to like pick the thing that takes advantage of that? Are you finding that scenario happening often?
I think Tekken 7 in general, what's gotten stronger is the character archetypes. So like at the beginning, there were no like DLC characters. So aside from Akuma, which people didn't realize he was cheap, but like if you've ever, it's based off of Street Fighter 4 Akuma. So like obviously he's busted. But like people didn't realize that back then. So you just had like, Mishima's, like for example, like when Tekken comes out, people always say like Paul is cheap because you can dash out to Demo Man where he like sweeps your legs and then like hits you with the elbow and then he does this and it like does a bajillion damage. But like that's such a, it's not like a low level technique, but like in order to do that, you have to be right in your opponent's face. Like it literally doesn't work unless you're like kissing your opponent. You have to be that close. So like that just meant people didn't know how to backdash out of that situation back then. That's like a mechanical thing. But like now everyone's like backdashes are immaculate. Like you cannot get close to people without risking taking damage, and then you got to like slowly work them to the back of the state, like to the wall, So like people don't play Paul anymore. Basically the only way for him to open you up is to use like this really pretty slow low that doesn't do that much damage. And if it gets blocked, it hurts. So over time, people move from like those, because Paul was like a 50-50 character. And he does a lot of damage, but like now people play him to do punishment. But I guess that's the thing, is Tekken used to just more or less be about punishment, whiffs, and block punishment. Mm-hmm. But in Tekken 7, the offensive meta has definitely grown to where the best defense is a good offense. Obviously, you don't want to whiff. You never want to whiff in Tekken. And you don't want them to block something that's like a unsafe move that they can launch you for. Right. But otherwise, you want to keep your opponent either guessing when you're going to attack or just blocking stuff. Because there are a lot of moves that are plus on block. And there are a lot of moves that are so quick that you can't react to them. So the only defense to that is to try to make space and to move. But in doing that, you're giving your opponent more openings. And like you get characters like, for example, one is Marduk. The other was, what's his face? Fakumram. So Marduk punishes you for moving away because he gets a Valetudo like tackle attempt where he runs at you. Think of like Honda headbutt, but instead of like just you blocking it, like he tries to tackle you. and you have to break it like it's a throw.
Oh,
And if you don't, then you get put into this mini game, which is literally a 50-50. And again, like that's an offensive thing. Like the Marduk player doesn't have like you can't like break the throw and then punch Marduk and get damage. You just get up and you don't get hurt. That's the best possible situation. So by playing defensively, you give him more openings for that.
right.
Another one would be Fakumram when he first came out. He has guard breaks, which is something that's really new in Tekken, to where he'll charge a move. It's like focus. He pretty much has focus attack level 3, but it's not like. But it comes out in the level 1.5 timing. Like the one where if you press a button into it, you get counter hit, then it crumples.
Yep.
It's that speed, but it breaks your guard, and then if he does it at the wall, it wall splats you. So basically, it becomes a launcher. Like you get a full combo from it.
That's drive impact. That's just straight up drive impact. Six just stole that from Fakumram. Okay, I see how it is.
What's new? But no, so he can do it out of a lot of different attack strings. So you can't always know when it's coming. Is the problem? Like drive impact, from what I've seen, it's pretty much like the big shiny button. Like you see it. Right, like it's flashy, like you see it's happening, right?
Sure.
And maybe it's hard to react to, but it's like a singular thing, which maybe that makes it harder to react to. I don't know. I haven't played 6, but Fakumram, all of his guard breaks come out of strings where he has an option where if he doesn't do the guard break and you try to interrupt it, it will clip you, and then he wall splats you anyway. So like that was a lot of his game plan. Is you're like, well, I'm defending and I'm losing because I'm defending too much. So that is to say, and then there's also freaking Akuma and Geese where like Akuma literally will vortex you to death if you're not careful.
Right.
His sweep and his some of his his mid options are the same speed. So like they're literal 50-50s. You can't really fuzzy guard them. And they reach like the sweep reaches relatively far. So if the Akuma smells you're being defensive, they're going to just destroy your legs. And every time you get swept, you can tech roll in Tekken, but like he can still set up a pseudo vortex. And if you're not fast enough in your defense, he can get into crouching medium kick range in Street Fighter.
So it seems like then, to make sure I completely understand this here, like the way the Tekken 7's meta has evolved throughout its lifespan has kind of moved more towards, like neutral was always a thing, like as you mentioned with whiff punishing and blocking and unsafe punishes and whatnot, but the ability to skip neutral and force situations that create 50-50s. It's not the actual act of the 50-50 like with Paul, but more like if I have some kind of mobility option that's going to create a situation where this guy just has to deal with it. That's what's strong in Tekken 7.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably what people are going to gravitate to immediately in Tekken 8, right? Just because that's
if that's still there, yeah. So one of the new mechanics they added in the latest patch is wall stun. We just call it new tactics because it's just a new thing that they added randomly. Basically, if your back is to the wall, so just like how Fakumram had a guard break, where if you block certain moves, literally you just get like comboed at the wall. They sort of toned it down and gave it to everyone in that if you get hit by certain moves at the wall or block certain moves at the wall, and I'll get into this in a second, you get put into a stun, but you're allowed to block, but you're at heavy disadvantage. I'm talking like you basically just got up from getting knocked down in Street Fighter terms, like real bad, and you're still with your back to the wall. So like you're minus a billion and you can't backdash anymore after these moves. And they just put that in at the end of the game. So like, no, like, they want you to deal with the offense. And the funny thing is, Steve's is bad and Claudio's is good. The reason Steve's is bad is because they took a move. The way they implemented it is they took moves that characters already had and gave it the property, and it changes the move.
Got it.
The reason Steve's is bad is because his used to be an actual launcher in situations, like it would lead to a full combo before they added the new technique. Now that it's the new technique, if you get hit by it, the default animation changed. Instead of being in a state where you can get comboed, it puts you in a state where you're just at disadvantage. Which you can't
that's a nerf then.
It literally is a nerf. And I didn't think about it. I didn't think about it when it first came out, but I was like, wait, I'm giving up damage for frame advantage, but I already had like enough frame advantage to do a combo. So I found that really funny. But guess what Claudio's is? It's literally one of his main moves. Claudio does the Superman punch, like Clark Kent, he just flies at you. and it's just a high move. And he's had this since the beginning of the game, and he was always plus, like very plus on block. But now they said, you know, it'd be a good idea if they block this and their back is to the wall. Let's make him even more plus. So now when I do that move and your back is to the wall, you're in a terrible situation, like really bad. And I can just keep looping it until you were like, you know what? Let me duck this high. But then you ducked and your back is to the wall and you get launched wall splatted. So that's another way of like two different characters getting treated differently by the mechanics.
Yeah, but it's and the stronger one being the one that creates the situations where you just got to deal with it now.
It just made it better. It
Yeah.
just took a good situation and made it better. Whereas
Yeah.
Steve's, they changed it, and I think they changed it for the worse.
Got it. Well, for our game for today, we usually do a game at the end of every episode, and I believe our game this time is going to be a tier list for Arizona Tekken, and that's going to be a very
I say
contentious battle, right?
The way I want you to do it, also because we are kind of cutting it close on time, I want you to do this quick, just because like I just want to know like right off the top of your head. You can put yourself at the top, or you can choose to exclude yourself if you want. We'll see. I'll see what you want to do, but I want to know. I don't know. Do I want to do like a 10? Do a 10? Oh, let's break them up kind of like into just like like a normal tier list, like S tier, A tier, that kind of thing. So for your like your A tier players in the Tekken scene in Arizona, like that way you don't have to rank people specifically, right? Like you don't have to put 1, 2, 3, whatever. Who would you put in that top tier? Who's B tier and C tier? And we'll go till you get to 10.
Okay, so yeah, just all right. So I guess I'll go with like S first, or that sounds so
Yeah, we
dumb.
could go S.
I'll
We
do
could go
A
S.
first.
We're calling it
S tier
S.
sounds so
SGC.
pretentious.
We're calling it S.
Okay,
Call
fine.
it
S
S.
tier in Arizona. It's going to be starting with the active players. It's myself, Sean Dude, and then I guess trying to think of like who actively. And yeah, so of like the people that still play in tournaments. Yeah, because
You
that's
and
the
Sean
thing is like
on S?
people don't like play that much. Yeah, and then non-active players that like come every now and again. Kane, still an S tier player. Project Runaway. Let's see, what's Conscript. I think he still is in Arizona, so like he's super good. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's it. People that like live in Arizona.
Okay.
That play most of the time. And then A, I would be so I have Thunderpants, Machete is super good, but he just he's literally in like Japan right now. Like he's always not in town.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. Swagoo, Sepulvedajin. I would say Umber Witch. She doesn't really play much anymore. So what is that, like 9? And I just did 2 tiers.
Hey, you're almost at like 10.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really weird because it's just like not that many people really play like that anymore. And then I guess B would be like, actually, what's this? I would also say Alan is probably A2. And then after that, yeah, it would be like Beanie Stugats, Beaver, CJ. Dang, what else do I even play that much?
I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. So there's a couple more up and coming players, but I think like those are some of the better ones. Oh yeah, well I guess there's also the people that were in the 10v10, but some of those were up and comers too.
That's fair. I mean, yeah. You basically, I think you named 11. Yeah, you named 11 in the S and A tier. So I guess that'll be enough to kind of see like Hey, how come I'm not up there?
Oh yeah, I'm sure somebody will be like, I beat
That
you last week," and I'll be like, "I've never played this game so
Not-
much." God, like,
But
yeah, not that
real
I'm
quick
trying to
though,
stir up drama or anything.
we do know that there's a tier above S, and that's SS, and we do know that Lupe Fiasco and Waka Flocka Flame occupy that tier.
obviously,
Yeah.
obviously.
Oh man, that's too good.
Well, very cool. Thanks for being on, Steve. It was a good
Yep.
talking to you again, man.
Thanks for having me, John and Benny. Yeah, it was fun nerding out on Tekken and all the different games. So
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Any shout outs?
For sure. So shout outs to obviously the AZ Tekken scene in Phoenix and Tucson. Phoenix guys are the ones that I play with all the time.
Yeah.
So like they keep me in practice. The newer players, especially, like maybe I didn't rank some of you guys on the thing, but it's just because you guys haven't like gotten to that level yet. But I know there's a lot of hunger for a lot of the players, so shout outs to them. They are also the ones that kept me playing, honestly,
Mm.
because they just wanted to get better and beat Tucson and this, that, and the other. So I was like, okay, well, see if you can beat me first, and then get to them. And a lot of them have leveled up, so that's awesome.
Nice.
Shout outs to all the TOs that have been running events. Like it's crazy how many events we have in Phoenix. There's literally 2 this weekend. There's one right now, which I said I couldn't go to. There's one in Mesa. So shout outs to Russell for doing that.
Actually, yeah, real quick. If I wanted to learn how to play Tekken and get into the Arizona scene, what would you recommend I do? Would you go casuals or tournament? Like where would I go? How would
Oh
you
yeah, you
promote the
should
scene
definitely go to casuals. So there's a bunch of discords and groups out there. So you can always start at home if you have it on PC or PS4. But yeah, like if you're in Arizona, get on the the Arizona Fighting Game Community Facebook group, and just say, "Hey, I want to play Tekken," and somebody will speak to you. I will, or somebody. I also have like a chat that we're in that we just talk about events and stuff. There's also a 3D Fighters Discord that Daniel Benitez runs, Dragon Ninja. He's like, the main TO. So shout outs to him. He's been running Z Axis for as long as Tekken 7's been out for all 3 games. So that's just amazing. And it's just like every month, right? We have a monthly where we can just play.
Yeah.
So he was the first one. But yeah, so check out the AZ FGC Facebook group, the Discord, and contact me, and we can get you information about all the different casuals and tournaments, of which there's at least like 1 casuals a week. Sometimes we have 2 to 3 tournaments a week. It just depends. And it's all over the Phoenix area. Like there's Phoenix, Scottsdale, Tempe, Mesa, wherever you are. Like there's probably an event. So
Cool.
Nice. You mentioned Russell. What event is that?
Russell, it's called Godfist.
Godfist. Okay, because there's another place actually in Gilbert. That's the place I talked in the previous episode. There's a PC gaming place. I think it's called
Oh,
Contender.
sorry. Yeah. So that is another one. Contender is one, but I'm sorry. So Godfist Tuesdays is at Olympus Games in Mesa. That's
Okay.
literally finishing up right now. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna check in my chat and see who won after this. And
Yeah.
then the Contender, I need to check more on that. Like I know that's going on and that they do have Tekken there, but where did you say that
Yeah.
was? I haven't like
I
looked at
think
the
that's
thing.
in Gilbert. Yeah, I think that's in East Gilbert. Yeah, I'd have
Okay.
to. That's the place I was planning to check out, but I noticed that they were starting to run fighting game Saturday events. So, yeah, I figured that's probably something. Yeah, I figured that's something that you could probably get wind of eventually, and maybe see if people are going over there, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've definitely heard about that.
And then
But
where is Z Axis hosted at? And how
and
could I
Z
go play?
Axis is at the gaming zone, which is here in Tempe.
Oh,
Yeah,
Cool.
so that one's
Lots
That's
of
like a
resources if you want to pick up Tekken in the sunset period, I think, and then be ready,
yeah.
get ready for Tekken 8, basically.
Yeah, I don't think Tekken 7 ever really died down, and there's all sorts of online tournaments, literally every day of the week. Like you just have to just post on Twitter and be like, "Is there a tournament?" And someone will be like, "Yeah, we're running a 5-man bracket for $20. Like just get on this Discord." That's pretty much how it is.
Yeah, cool. Well, once
Yeah.
again, Mr. Will Get Paid, we appreciate you coming on and talking with us. You can catch us again next week on Tuesday at 5 p.m. We don't have a guest finalized at the moment, but stay tuned to the Twitter and we'll post up information once we get that finalized. Yeah, you can find us here on Twitch when we go live at twitch.tv/spiral series, on YouTube with the VODs at youtube.com/spiral series, and then on Apple Podcasts and Spotify under Absolute Guard.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.